Hello and welcome to our May 2016 monthly town call, Mentoring, the Next Step to Success. My name is Daniel Lawrence Smith, Associate Director of Training here at Out and Equal Workplace Advocates. This is a broadcast audio call and it will be 1 hour long. Please be sure to turn up the headsets and volume on your computer so that you can hear. And we're going to ask for your active participation during the call, so there will be some polls and questions, and please participate and respond. A reminder that this session will be recorded and available on our website as a digital archive after the call. A few announcements here at Out and Equal. On June 29th, we will have a global town call with perspectives on Brazil. June 30th will be our monthly town call, Governance Model and Executive Sponsors, a Key to a Successful BRG. July 28th, our call will be HR Insights, Best Practices and Policies for Transgender Employees and Customers. August 25th will be our town call on ERG-BRG development. September 28th will be our global town call with perspectives on Italy. And of course, October 4th through 7th will be our 2016 Out and Equal Workplace Summit in Orlando, Florida. And our Leadership Day will be Tuesday, October 4th. A reminder that our early bird registration rates end on June 15th. Again, our topic today is mentoring, the next step to success. But before we kick off, we want to get a feel for who's on the call with us. So here's where we have a poll, and we're going to ask, what is your role within your company? And feel free to check all that apply. So go ahead and put in your answer and then hit submit, and we'll be able to see the results in real time. Great, I have about half of you having responded so far. And it's good to see that we have a great mixture of folks on the call with us today. So executives, ERG-BRG members, some HR and D&I folks, and then LGBT and allied employees. Great. And the next question is, does your company currently have a mentor or sponsor program? And go ahead and put in your answer for that. Great. About half of you have responded so far. And I'm seeing more than half of you saying that yes, you do. Some great interest in creating one. Looking for more info. Great. Super. With that, we have a fantastic group of panelists joining us today, and I'll allow each of them to briefly introduce themselves, and then we'll kick off into the topic. And let's go ahead and begin with Clif.
Great, thanks Daniel. Hi everyone, I'm Clif Mathews, a senior manager at Deloitte. I've worked at Deloitte for almost 14 years now, and I specialize in helping our clients with accounting and reporting impacts of transactions. So that can be acquisitions, divestitures, and IPOs. And historically, I've also held a leadership position in our gay and lesbian ERG. Rick?
Thank you. Rick?
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Clif. So my name is Rick Wilson. I am a Director of Diversity and Inclusion at AT&T, and I'm responsible for diversity strategy. And I own different diversity segments, including the LGBT and allies diversity segment. Like Clif, I also am an elected leader within one of our employee resource groups here in the Dallas-Fort Worth market.
And Pat.
Thanks, Daniel, and thanks, Clif and Rick. This is Pat Bailey, Director of Training and Professional Development here at Out and Equal, and I am also part of the steering committee on the Community of Practice on recruiting, retention, and promotion, and mentoring is one of those key aspects of that. And there's some information we can provide for you if you want to get involved, but we're looking forward to hearing what's happening out there in the field. So thanks for joining us on the call.
Great, and with that, we'll turn it over to Clif and Rick.
Great, thanks Daniel. So to start, we have the agenda for today's session in front of you, and as you've already heard, we'll be talking about the topic of mentorship and also about sponsorship. And we'll start with talking about what is that, and comparing and contrasting those two things, and what do they mean for your career. And then we'll talk about how to put this into practice, how to build a mentoring program. There's types of mentoring programs, so we'll talk about those. And then also the role of allies. And then finally, we'll dive a little bit deeper into the topic of evolving relationships from mentor to sponsor, which will make a little bit more sense when we talk about those two roles and how they compare and contrast. And then we'll try to leave some time at the end for questions. So starting with just kind of the what is it, mentorship and sponsorship. And what you see on the screen here is a kind of a high-level simplistic view of what these terms are. So a mentor will talk to you. A mentor will give you advice. A mentor will draw upon their own experience and perhaps provide suggestions on a path forward. A sponsor will talk about you, and that's a key difference. A sponsor certainly probably has some mentor elements where they're giving you advice of steps that you could be taking, but then they take that to the next level where they help you take those steps. They may help open doors for you. They may unlock additional professionals in your organization that are a part of that path. They take a more active role in that path forward. And so let's look a little bit more even specifically about a mentor versus a sponsor and what those look like. Starting on the left in blue, we have a mentor. They offer advice and support. They allow you to take your own career moves. They leave ownership to that mentee. So again, the ownership rests with the person who's driving their own career. Typically, they're more seasoned than the mentee, but really they can be any level. But the reason that seasoning is important is that they're drawing upon their experience to give advice and to sort of tell the stories about, I've been there, done that, and here's what I learned. They draw on their experience to offer ideas, to offer, again, advice, and they sometimes can provide a strategy. But the interesting thing about this relationship is that typically it's a private relationship. You think about having conversations with your mentor. Those are probably one-on-one conversations. They may not be happening where other people can overhear. And because of the sort of passive nature of the mentor's role, this is a lower risk role. That person really isn't taking a lot of risk in being a mentor to you because they're really just sharing stories and advice and providing recommendations. And certainly a mentor has an important place in a career journey. We contrast that then with a sponsor, which is what you see on the right in green. You're going to see a lot more active verbs here. They actively advocate for your career. They assist in gaining visibility for you. They take ownership of opening doors. They're typically more senior in the organization with access to senior leadership. That's really key because remember, they're opening doors. They're using their own political capital for you. And so it's important that first and foremost they have political capital to be able to use for you. They actively work to help execute career strategies. So whereas the mentor may have given ideas on a strategy, the sponsor helps you actually execute that strategy. And then the interesting thing about this relationship is it really moves to higher risk, and it moves to being public. Because this person, like we said on the previous slide, they're running around talking about you, right? They're opening doors for you. They're helping you execute on your own strategic objectives. That naturally is a more public type relationship. Their advocacy for you is public, and that means it's higher risk. So next up we have a polling question. Daniel, did you want to facilitate this, or do you want me to?
Go ahead and go for it.
Okay, sure. How familiar are you with the idea of career sponsorship? And just select which one you feel like most appropriately describes your familiarity level. Very, I have one or more career mentors or sponsors. Somewhat, I've heard of them, or not at all. I don't even know what a career sponsor is until you mentioned it just now. And if you'll select your answer and click the submit button. Good, and what we're seeing here, first of all, I guess, is a mix. Certainly there are a number of people, just south of 20%, who are very familiar. And then looks like just around 1/3, not at all, but a majority of people in that kind of middle bucket where I'm somewhat familiar, I've heard of them. So, hopefully our time together today helps increase you on that spectrum and help you become not only more familiar with the idea of mentorship and sponsorship, but really provide you some how-to on how to execute on this. And let's talk a little bit now about potential sponsors. So we talked about, theoretically what is a sponsor, but as you look at engaging someone to be a sponsor for you, it's important to know, who am I looking for? Who's a good sponsor? What are some of the attributes that would make someone or lend itself to someone being my sponsor? They're admired as a leader. They're someone that other people look up to, that they command a lot of respect in the organization. If you think about what their role is, where they're going and advocating for you, it's important that people listen to what they have to say. They're admired for their people skills, and also they have strong strategic skills. And they're using those skills to help you be more active in your own career strategy, your own career growth, and also to take an active role themselves. And one important thing that we think is critical here is that they effectively combine their career with their personal life. And we've done a lot of sort of talking on this subject, and I've personally talked to a lot of people about what's important to you when you're talking with someone or you're using someone as a resource to help you advance in your career. And one of the concerns that a lot of people have as they sort of delve into this is, I'm afraid that someone's just going to push me to be a workaholic, and that's the way to get ahead. And really the contrary is true. It's the ability to balance career and personal life that truly makes someone successful for the long term. And so having someone who has effectively done that and has demonstrated that and can therefore not only give you advice about how to do it, but also open doors to help you do it, is really critical to that long-term success. And then again, they do offer their advice and support. The difference here is that they also take that more active role in actually achieving those objectives that you've set. And then one kind of interesting point is what you see in the green box here. This is someone who is mostly in you, but with whom you share commonalities. And there's two elements there. First, this person's mostly different from you. This isn't a peer in the organization. This isn't someone who really does the same job as you day to day. This is someone who's in a quite higher level role in the organization, because if you think about what activities they're performing as your sponsor, they need to have access that you don't have. And so they're different than you. But it's also important to have some sort of commonalities, I think. And the reason is that's the way to build a relationship with someone. A really meaningful sponsorship relationship probably can grow from some of those commonalities. So I've talked so far about what's a mentor, what's a sponsor, and what does a potential sponsor look like. And now I'll hand it over to Rick to talk about, how do we put this into practice? How do we build this into an organization?
Great. Thank you, Clif. So perfect segue. So I want to spend a little bit of time talking about some of the fundamentals that, depending on where your organization or your employee resource group is, relative to mentoring programs or sponsorship programs, that you at least have the foundational elements for the mentoring piece of it. And so I think a really good starting point for us is to just ask the question and to be thinking about your organization relative to where they are on the spectrum. So most organizations, and we saw that in some of the polling earlier, either have mentoring programs in place, and I'm going to make an assumption that the majority of you have employee resource groups or business resource groups within your organization. But thinking about that, kind of ask yourself, where are you in terms of your journey? Where is that organization? And so we've defined 3 different categories or buckets to think about kind of where you are in your employee resource group's journey. So the very first category is what we would call emerging. And so these are groups or programs that are very, very, very new. Maybe they have recently launched or in the process of getting launched, they're in planning. But these are organizations or programs that really don't have a lot of tenure. If you think about kind of the advancing group, these are employee resource groups that have been established for a while. They most likely have an executive sponsor or some executive leadership that is helping to guide the employee resource group in their goals and objectives. And then lastly, the group is called leading. And the leading are organizations who've been in place for quite some time. They have a lot of tenure. They have very robust programs in place, most likely mentoring or other programs that add business value back to your organization as an employee resource group. So thinking about that, I'd love to just do one more poll or offer up another poll about your lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and allies employee resource group. So the question is, where would you place it? Are you an emerging employee resource group? Are you advancing? Are you leading? Are you maybe not sure? Or maybe you don't even have one. And then, of course, there's a last option of other where you can actually chat in your results. So if you'd like to go ahead and poll, okay, it looks like we've got good percentage of you in the advancing. We almost have a tie in terms of respondents between emerging and leading. So, and then a few folks who said that they are not sure where they would place their employee resource group. So good, well good. So for those of you that are in any of those emerging or maybe even in an advancing, hopefully the content that we're going to share with you right now is also very helpful. So there's a few key steps, and I'm going to go into more detail in the coming minutes on each one of these, but in terms of developing a mentoring program, there are some basics, and you see those listed for you on the computer. So first of all, you want to establish some objectives in the direction of the organization. But regardless of how big or small you envision your mentoring program, where it ultimately will end up, you want to establish some level of program management. You want to be simple. You want to have a simple methodology in terms of how it gets established, but also be flexible because from our experience, no mentoring group is 100% the same. There's often variances based on what the mentor and or the mentees want to get out of the relationships. And then, of course, as Clif was alluding to earlier when he made the distinction between mentorship and sponsorship, you can evolve the mentoring relationship into sponsorship. And we'll talk about that a little bit later today. So there's varying types of mentoring programs, and you see them listed for you. Of course, one-on-one is probably the most familiar, where you have a protege paired with a mentor. Obviously, that offers the most degree of intimacy, and it's often facilitated. And so when we talk about strong program management, obviously the kind of the pairing, if you think, I hate to make the analogy to dating, but when you think about kind of how do you pair people up, right? What does the mentee or the protege want to get out of the relationship with the mentor? What leadership or professional skills do they need? And then what attributes do the mentor have that actually would be a good pairing? Obviously a high degree of commitment. We've seen some one-on-one mentoring relationships go very well, and sometimes they don't if there's not a good alignment. So again, strong commitment from both to stay engaged and to make that relationship work. The second group or type of mentoring program is a group mentoring. And this is where you have a small group of mentees paired with one mentor. And the really neat thing about the group mentoring is, of course, there is obviously learning from the mentor to the mentees, but there's also peer-to-peer mentoring that takes place in those type of relationships. But again, this requires strong project management. And some best practices that we've seen is to have what we'll call a circle lead or a chief of staff that helps run the group mentoring program. And that individual really serves as the single point of contact for the mentoring group to help establish the agendas, to ensure that the mentees' desires and wishes of the relationship are kind of bubbled up to the mentor, and then they carry that forward into the actual mentoring conversations. And then the very last type is cross-company. And this is really something that has been very, very beneficial for me personally as a leader of an employee resource group. Cross-company, so company to company, coming together, it has made our lives or my life so much easier relative to benchmarking best practices on employee resource group practices, diversity and inclusion issues, policy issues specific to LGBT issues. It has just been a really, really great way to connect with other businesses who might be at different places on their journey of inclusion to come together, network, and kind of build a business coalition. And then lastly, from a cross-company perspective, as those relationships continue to grow, there's a great opportunity for community impact. I think a lot of employee resource groups or business resource groups, one of the core focuses or for their organization is to give back to the community. And so by building a coalition of employee resource groups that support the LGBT community, there's the opportunity to partner, to either volunteer or do other community give back events. And my very last comment before we move forward is that one of the foundational elements of any mentoring relationship is built on trust. And so when you think about the makeup of an employee resource group, because they are open obviously to LGBT but also ally employees, the conversations that take place, regardless of the type of the mentoring relationship or program that you've established, that confidentiality is maintained. Specifically when you think about people's sexual orientation or gender identity or even their gender expression. So one of the best practices, of course, is to ensure that that confidentiality is clearly stated for all participants, and that includes the mentors as well as the mentees. So in terms of the establishment of objectives and direction, we've provided a few samples that both from Clif and I have come up to establish, what are some samples that we could share with each one of you. And so simple objectives include, obviously, pairing up the one-on-one relationship if that's the type of program that you would like to establish, obviously fostering the atmosphere of mutual respect, learning, and growth. Professional development is something that each one of us has an interest in or may have an interest in, and so ensuring that the type of programming that gets built into the objectives and the direction of the mentoring program obviously is very, very critical. Establishing a project management office. And so again, without clear, disciplined project management, mentoring programs can fall apart relatively quickly. And so, as I mentioned earlier, having either a chief of staff or an entire project management office that basically manages the tasks of all of the mentoring program will absolutely ensure the success of it. And some of the duties that the PMO would actually follow are listed for you as well. So in terms of the development of the mentorship program, keeping it simple is another key to success. And you can see that the objectives, the identification of both the mentors and the proteges in terms of what their goals and expectations are, there needs to be alignment at every step of the process. And the 4 key steps, obviously, are to identify the mentors, pairing them with the proteges, building a strong program, providing a toolkit so that the conversations are robust and meaningful, monitoring, so measuring the success of it. One of the best practices that we've implemented at AT&T is to ensure that there is a survey, both for the mentors and the proteges, as the program continues to move forward, so that if we need to make changes to the programming of the mentoring relationship, we have the ability to do that before it gets too late or before you start to lose interest of either the proteges or the mentors. And then lastly, sustainability. So once the program is up and running, ensuring that there is a strong network to keep it moving forward. Again, evaluating the success, making sure that the mentor and the mentees are getting what they need out of the relationship will ultimately continue the success as it moves forward. So how do you take your mentorship to the new level? How do you evolve that into sponsorship? And as Clif stated earlier, thinking about your mentors, don't discount them as potential sponsors. As you build your relationship with your mentor as a mentee, you essentially are getting face time. And Clif talked a little bit earlier about sponsors being at a higher level. Oftentimes from a mentoring program, they're very, very similarly structured. Depending on the level of the protege or the mentor, they'll get paired with someone who is either a level or 2 levels, potentially 3 levels above that employee. So every time that one of the mentoring sessions is actually facilitated, that's your opportunity or your protege's opportunity to establish a brand, a personal brand, with that mentor that ultimately can evolve into a potential sponsorship. And lastly, I'd like to talk a little bit about LGBT versus our ally mentors. And this might be more of a personal preference or personal choice. but there's benefits to both. So if you think about your LGBT mentors, those individuals, for those of you who identify as LGBT, you would understand or expect that they would have a shared LGBT experience, particularly in the workplace. Obviously, that person has walked in your shoes. They understand what it means to identify as LGBT, maybe some of the challenges that either he or she needed to overcome. And they can, of course, coach and mentor you as a mentee on some of the pitfalls, some of the successes, and some of the decisions that they've made over the course of their career. But ultimately, they'll be able to provide you with career advice and professional guidance when you think about career progression or professional skills development. On the flip side of that, we have our ally mentors. And of course, an ally mentor should, of course, understand foundational LGBT issues, but they still might have some questions. And so when you think about the PMO or the project management of establishing a mentoring program for your allies, it's important to make sure that your ally mentor is comfortable with the LGBT issue, and in that safe space, as a PMO, you get those questions answered in advance. Your ally mentors can also advocate for LGBT issues in a different way within your organization. And so by that I mean, sometimes it's easier for an ally to carry forward our issues or an LGBT issue without feeling or being perceived as being activist or one of those type of words that sometimes rub people the wrong way or can rub people the wrong way. But then, like your LGBT mentor, they also are able to provide career advice and professional guidance. And so really it is a personal choice, and both provide value. Daniel, would you like to take the next?
I'm going to pass it over to Pat.
Thanks, Daniel. And those are some great questions because many companies have mentoring programs that we set up, and obviously, your day job and your day job can be two different aspects. But sometimes we get to that point of saying, as someone who's LGBT, I might not feel comfortable talking to my boss about all the aspects, or my mentor or my sponsor. And so how do I begin to move through that process and begin to say, that's part of who I am, and I bring value to that? And we've seen one other program in addition to talking with executive sponsors and giving them some mentoring from our perspective from Out and Equal, but also creating a reverse mentoring program. A couple of questions came in that we'll address a little bit later about how do we get started with this? And obviously talking about LGBT versus ally mentors is about getting that understanding around cultural competency in place before you begin to say, how do I now advance my career with that? And so companies we found are beginning to take this intermediate step that says, we'll have a mentoring program, but it's a reverse mentoring. My execs, my team members, my managers are not comfortable enough yet to be able to have these discussions and feel culturally competent talking about LGBT. So how can I help them? And I, as a resource from the ERG side or as a LGBT employee or even ally, can help with that. So we've got a quick video we're going to share here from some of the work that Lily has done to talk about that reverse mentoring as another possibility.
My name is Pam Elmore, and I am the Director of Customer Experience Learning Center for Global Sales and Marketing.
I'm Wei Li Xiao, Vice President of Sales and Operations for Lilly USA. Our reverse mentoring relationship, Pam, I think has been going on for about 3 months.
3 months, yeah. And we started pretty quick into some pretty deep discussions.
In my line of work, I mentor a lot of people, but to be mentored was really gratifying because somebody else kind of took control and said, hey, listen, Whaley, what do you think about this and what do you think about that?
I came in sometimes with a little bit of skepticism about how genuine is this experience really going to be, and is it a check-the-box activity? And I was pleasantly surprised. Whaley is serious, and it made me all that more invested to help him learn and grow and be informed to make the right type of influence and culture impact in our environment.
Like in a lot of our jobs, one of our biggest responsibilities is creating these environments for our people so they feel like they can succeed. And so if you want to create these environments, you've got to understand the people that work in them. So to understand that, so you're not always walking on eggshells and you're not always, scared of what you're going to say because maybe you're not as knowledgeable. This kind of reverse mentoring situation or setup allows you to really understand, get comfortable, so that you can connect with everybody in your organization, and then really create that environment where people feel like they can achieve, bring their whole self to work, and just be happy with what they do.
I've learned that Lilly is the right place to work. The passion that you bring to our mentoring relationship and the trust that he's investing as a leader to try to learn so he can grow and influence and change the culture has really been a huge value to me. It's also reminded me that I've been fortunate. In my area, I'm very supported through leadership. My colleagues, my friends, my family have all accepted and understood my lifestyle and embrace it. And it reminds me that there's a lot of people out here that they've disassociated from their families. They're not comfortable coming out. So it's raised my commitment to try to help those people feel safe to come out in their work environment.
Hey, Pam.
Hi.
Hey, you look good today. Nice colors.
Hey, thanks. I like yours too.
Yeah. See, our relationship is so close. We're even color coordinated.
So again, we kind of see that relationship developing between a mentor and, in this case, reverse mentoring. And in talking with your executive sponsors, many times they walk into their situations not feeling comfortable in terms of being those executive sponsors. And that opportunity to provide some of that input as LGBT and allies to those mentors and the sponsors and their teams is important. So let's talk about building that relationship a little bit more, and I'll turn it back over to Clif and Rick at this point.
Great, thanks very much, Pat. And so that's what we'll talk about now. How do I establish, in this case, a sponsor relationship? And like Rick was saying earlier, there's often an opportunity to evolve a mentor relationship into one of a sponsor. And so that's specifically kind of what we'll talk about here. There's really a 5-step process here that we've developed that really breaks this down and makes it, in bite-sized pieces. First is evaluate your goals. Second, focus on earning a sponsor, not just finding one, and we'll talk a little bit about why that's important. Third, take the lead. Number 4, stay open. And number 5, take credit for your work. So what we'll do now is essentially dive into each of those steps and see what do we mean by each of those. First of all, evaluate your goals. Just like what Rick was saying earlier, it's important to know going in, what do I want out of this relationship? What are my career goals, and what do I want or need someone to help me with? And so what are your overall goals are you hoping a sponsor can help you achieve? What outcomes are you expecting? What do you want to learn? And how do you want this relationship to work? As you can imagine, there's a spectrum of, or probably several spectrums, of how a sponsor relationship can work. They can be formal or informal. Maybe you're meeting in person, or maybe this person lives somewhere else across the country, and so you're virtually connecting, either video chats or texting or emailing or phone calls. And this could be a short-term or a long-term relationship. Maybe you have a very near-term goal objective. Maybe there's a promotion right on the horizon that you need a little bit extra push for. Or maybe this is more of a long-term play for you because there's more long-term goals that you're looking to focus on. So really evaluating those goals, really getting specific and clear on what is it that you're looking to get out of that relationship. And then step 2 being, earning a sponsor relationship and not just finding one. The interesting thing about a sponsor, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, was how active they are in helping you achieve your objectives and how much of themselves they give. Remember, this is a public relationship. This is a high-risk relationship for them. And that's the reason that it's important that you, essentially need to earn it versus just having it sort of handed to you. So what may potential sponsors want to see in a prospective candidate for sponsorship? So if I'm someone who's willing to sponsor someone, what kind of attributes do I want them to have? They need to be a strong performer. If I'm going to run around and talk about how awesome they are and that they should be promoted or they should be considered for XYZ opportunity, they need to have a track record that shows that when they get that opportunity or they get that promotion, they're going to do well with it and that they're going to own it and embrace it. They have a consistent personal brand. One of the things that's important in a sponsor relationship is not only that you have a consistent personal brand as the person being sponsored, but that your sponsor is quite aware of that personal brand. And the reason is that, of course, they're imparting your brand in others. They're going around and talking about you. And you want to make sure that the message that they're putting out there is the message that you want to have put out there and really is your personal brand that's consistent with your long-term goals. Shows up with professional presence. And that's just another way of kind of saying what I've been talking about, but it's really important that that person themselves is able to command respect and is able to lead people, because often that's the path that this ends up going down. And then requires a bit of a boost to get on a high-level radar. So I might be looking for someone who has a lot of potential, and also maybe there's a gap in their ability to get kind of that next level to be able to achieve one of their objectives, maybe not because of merit, but maybe because of visibility or because of other factors. And so looking for someone who has that potential and may need that help is what the sponsor is doing. So these are things to think about when you think about, well, I would like to get a sponsor, I'd like to earn a sponsor. These are some of the things that a sponsor may be looking for. And then another element here is take the lead. And this maybe goes without saying, but it's worth talking about is this is an area where it really is important to own your own career, own your career development. Take an active role in trying to secure that sponsor. Setting your objectives, coming up with how you think you want this relationship to work, identifying who are the potential sponsors, and being thoughtful about how is this relationship going to benefit both of you. And that's one thing that we've not talked about yet, but it's going to be important that this is a symbiotic relationship, that the sponsor is getting something out of this too. Because again, if you think about their role here, this is an active role. They're taking a risk, and with a risk should come a reward. So what are they going to get out of this? If they suggest you for a promotion, what are they going to get out of that? Are they then going to look good when you do well in a new job? What is it that is going to benefit them? And it's really important to understand that going in, because you want to make sure that you make good on that reward for them, right? So whatever it is that they're getting out of this, you want to make sure that they end up getting it, because if someone's a sponsor one time for you, they're probably going to be a sponsor more times for you if it's successful. And then finally, stay open. And some of this has to do with what we've already talked about, well, do I get an ally for a sponsor or a mentor? Does it need to be another LGBT person? Do they need to be within my organization, or can they work for a different company? How alike me do they have to be? Staying open. The right sponsor may not be in your department or even at your company. And just like we talked about earlier, they're probably going to be quite different from you. And that's actually is one of the things that's going to make them a really powerful sponsor for you. And one of the things that we say right here on the screen is it's quite possible that they may be at another company. They may be in an industry organization, maybe even somewhere like a volunteer organization. If you come across someone who works in a similar industry as you do, or does a similar job that you do, and has the ability to open those doors for you. And then finally, we talked already about being a strong performer and having a strong personal brand, and the importance that is in being someone who someone else wants to sponsor. An important part of that is taking credit for the work. Show how what you're doing aligns with the organization's goals, strategies, and growth. How are you accretive to your organization's strategy? Because when that sponsor is sponsoring you, is taking an active role, is going and advocating for you, that's an important part of the message, which is how is this person really furthering our objectives as an organization such that they should be given this opportunity, or they should be given this promotion, or XYZ door should be unlocked for them. And so an important part of this is to take credit for that work. You may be doing things that align with your organization's strategies and growth, but people may not know it. And so that's another part of that relationship with a sponsor. And even in just establishing the sponsorship is that you've taken credit for the really great things that you've been doing. And then this is just kind of reiterates what I've been talking about, but earning a sponsorship, strong performance track record, ability to provide results, exceptional work experience, strong people skills, high level of ambition, demonstrated achievements in the company culture. So these are the things that are really important that you're able to demonstrate, that you, sort of emulate to be someone who can go out and find a sponsor and engage a sponsor. And and what you can see in the green box is, look, everyone doesn't have this day one. It's fine. Figure out where are the gaps for yourself that you need to work on. Maybe you're someone who just doesn't have a lot of people skills, and maybe that's something that is important to the path that you want to go down. And actually, a lot of the things on this list here is something that a mentor can help you with, which is give you advice around, how do I develop my people skills? How do I, get work experience when I haven't done anything before, so no one will put me on their project because I don't have the experience? And that's where you can start to shift a relationship from a mentorship to a sponsorship, when first maybe someone's given you advice about, well, how do I increase my people skills? And then you've taken that advice and you've become really successful at this. And then that unlocks the door to take that relationship to the next level of sponsorship. And then there again at the bottom, sponsor relationships should be two-way. There again, it should be symbiotic. Each of you should be getting something out of this relationship. And so we'll actually move now to our last polling question. And you should have in the lower left corner of your screen the text chat. And what you can do is just answer this question essentially within the text chat and text in your response. But the question is, how do you see a sponsor relationship being symbiotic? And so we've talked a lot probably about you as a sponsee. What are you going to get out of this? But maybe let's focus on what's the sponsor going to get out of this? Like how can this relationship be symbiotic? So I'm just going to read some of what's coming through here. There we go. They demonstrate their commitment to a company's diversity. Both parties learn and connect to the different levels in the company. Both partners receiving a benefit. Both grow professionally as a result of the interaction. That's a good one. The person who entered into the relationship works well together, and they have the same goals and they want the same outcomes for each other. They show their people development skills. It can show leadership skills for that sponsor. Beyond making a good showing when giving an opportunity, sponsees can go the extra mile to showcase their skills and talent by helping their sponsor with projects, challenges, etc. they may be facing. That's a good point, is that a lot of times your sponsor has their own goals and objectives, right? And so one way that you can get more involved in strategic projects is to help that person with their own goals and objectives. I've actually approached conversations like that in a similar way in the past, is to say, especially if I have someone that I've been working with who kind of moves into a new role where maybe they're taking on a new leadership role, and I just ask them, how can I help? What's on your mind? What concerns do you have that I can help you address? And I found that unlocks a really different conversation with someone, about how can I be involved, and really kind of ignites that sponsorship type relationship. You may have some skills and experience that they see it as advantageous and strategic, and so they're also able to kind of tap in those skills. If I succeed, the sponsor looks good as well for finding good talent. Sponsors tend to get coaching skills out of this relationship. There's also a conspicuous benefit to sponsoring someone in the eyes of execs. And the shared vision with different perspectives can be rewarding for both parties. Yeah, absolutely. Just the experience of sponsoring someone else can be personally rewarding. And then working with respect to each other. understand and gain exposure to challenges in the workplace that may be new and generational. So there again, you may actually be giving experiences to your sponsor that they wouldn't be having otherwise. Well, thanks everyone for responding to that question and for being so active in the text chat. I think now we'll open it up for Q&A. Pat, I'll hand it to you.
Sounds good. And I know we've got a couple questions that came in. There was some, you talked about it a little bit, but again, kind of pitching that sponsor value added for that potential sponsor. What's in it for them? What are some of the best aspects that you've seen that really works to get them connected and buying in on the mentoring from both of your perspectives, from your own experiences?
Yeah, this is Clif. I can start. I think something that's really important is that this is someone who has a passion for people and the people side of a business. And the reason I say that is, if you think about, again, that sponsorship relationship, even a mentorship relationship, both types, there's a lot of energy that they have to put forth to establish and maintain that type of a relationship, and especially for a sponsor who isn't just having conversations and giving advice, but is actually going and opening doors for you. It takes a lot of energy, it takes a lot of commitment, and it's a risk. Remember, it's a higher risk relationship, and so I think one thing that's really important is that person is passionate about the people side of the business and is passionate about helping others in their career journey.
Yeah, and this is Rick. I'll weigh in on the mentoring side. I would agree a lot of what Clif just described from a sponsor perspective, because I see so many similarities. But I think that one of our best practices has really kind of engaged with our future mentors around the role of mentors in their life, right? Because whether or not they all come to mind, we've all had mentors in our life. And so to formally put a program in place that creates a relationship for an individual to share with those who are trying to either just get their career started or looking for professional development kind of opens their eyes. But like Clif said, they really do need to be passionate. They need to have some passion around the people side and development of the organization. And, not everyone fits that bill, and not everyone might be interested in doing it depending on where they are in their own career, right? They may not have the bandwidth or the time to commit to a mentoring relationship, and that's okay, but you still have that conversation as you approach individuals, and then you just bookmark them for future follow-up if they do have an interest, but right now is not the right time.
Great. And we've had a couple questions about, I think you did a great job of laying out how do you develop a mentor-sponsor program if you're going to go down that path. But again, assuming that the program doesn't exist or there's not a company interested in doing that, how do you approach potential sponsors, or how do you go to an external sponsor? Are there some options and ways to be able to approach that, or some best practices that you've found?
So this is Clif. I'll maybe start off here again. I think with a mentorship, I think certainly a program that like Rick has been talking about, lends itself to matching people, and then those relationships can sometime evolve, or often can evolve into sponsorships. I think though a standalone sponsorship relationship really doesn't need a program in place, and if you kind of think about the nature of that relationship, it's quite organic. It's hard to, sort of manufacture or create a sponsorship when there's not a natural way to do it. And so I think, first of all, a lack of having a program around a sponsor relationship is totally okay. I think if I think in my own career, the sponsor relationships that I have, they have not been born out of a program. They've been born out of, individual relationships. A lot of times, people that I've come across either in my, my day job, my involvement in ERG, wherever in the organization, but it's individual people that I've come across. And then in terms of, well, how do I approach that conversation? How do I get started? I think there's a few ways. One of them is what I talked about earlier, which is put yourself in the shoes of that potential sponsor and think, what is it that they need? What are they looking for? What goals do they have? Maybe what challenges do they have in their own career? And then, sometimes I've been able to think myself, well, what are some potential solutions, and bring that to them? Or sometimes I just ask the question and say, hey, you're in this new role. What's worrying you? And, are there ways that I can help you be successful? So I think that's one way to approach it. I also think that something that can really be a catalyst here is being vocal about your own career goals and making sure that, this kind of goes back to that personal brand point that I was making earlier, but making sure that your career goals are widely known. And the reason that's important is that then when you are approaching someone to be your sponsor, or you may even have someone approach you who, is passionate enough that they want to help even though you haven't asked for help, it's really important that step one is that, people kind of know what your objectives are. And then maybe step 0 is for you to know what your own objectives are. Rick, I don't know if you have other thoughts.
No, I agree 100%. And, as you think about finding that sponsor, just reflecting on what you were saying, Cliff, is it's so relational. And so if there's a leader or someone within your organization that you don't know, but you want to get to know them, right, and it might evolve into that type of a sponsorship relationship down the road, is that you find someone within your organization that knows that person that you admire, right? Because it's all about networking and kind of sharing what Cliff just said about what are your career aspirations and goals, and then working through your network to get introduced and to start building that relationship that may evolve into the sponsorship.
That's great. Those are good insights on that. How about if I'm thinking about some potential situations, part of your career goal is to change employers. Any thoughts or ideas or best practices about how to approach that? The general skills obviously work with a mentor kind of aspect, but how do you not burn down that bridge when you leave the company?
So this is Rick. I'll just take a swing at the bat first on that. So if I go back to mentoring, though, when we were talking earlier about cross-company mentoring, there's definitely value in building relationships outside of your own organization. And so if you have a formal, even if you don't have a formal cross-company mentoring program, that is a great way to get connected within the local community, or even if you're looking to maybe even move cities or transfer, whatever your case might be when you're looking for that career pivot, just building that network only helps. And even if you, like I said, if you don't have a formal program in place, it's okay. Just start asking questions. Most of us work at organizations with several employees, so just start asking the question, hey, do you know anyone that works at whatever company or industry that you're interested in? You'd be surprised at the number of people that have connections, and 6 degrees of separation. I heard it's actually a smaller number than that, actually. So someone knows someone that can help get you connected, and you can start building those relationships externally. I do think you do need to approach it with caution from an internal perspective, right? So if you're in an organization, maybe you've tried that and you don't know anyone, you just need to be very mindful and cautious of who you're kind of expressing those interests to, because, again, you don't want to build that bridge. So that it goes back to, if you have established relationships internally that are built on trust and confidence, you can go to those individuals or someone within your employee resource group and start having those conversations for advice that, again, won't be widely known within the organization, because that can be a little sensitive when you're looking to make that pivot outside of your current organization.
Yeah, Rick, I would completely agree with that. And I think one thing that can be interesting too is that you could be in a situation where you've come to a conclusion that your current job or your current career path is not the right one for you. And so it's not necessarily even that you may be targeting a specific company or industry. You're actually more fundamentally than that trying to figure out, what do I want to do next? And I've been in situations where I've had that conversation with some of my colleagues to help them think about what's my next step. And I do think, and Rick, I completely agree with you, having those conversations, you have to be careful that they're had in the right way and that they're had with the right people, because certainly, there's some risk involved in opening up in that way. But I do think that at least my experience has been, there are people out there who are completely open to having that type of conversation, and to help, to help in both a mentor and a sponsor capacity. And so to help in a mentor capacity and provide you advice about maybe what could you be thinking about doing next, and what might you find fulfilling, and then from that sponsor lens, they may actually have, Rick, like you were saying, they may have contacts out there that they can help facilitate introductions. If I kind of think about my own frame of reference, where I work at Deloitte, we're a professional services firm. We have a lot of clients, and we outplace our professionals to clients often. We have an apprenticeship culture, and attrition is natural. And so, I fully recognize every organization isn't like that, but there are opportunities to leverage those sponsor networks and leverage that political capital that also exists outside of their organization.
Yeah, great inputs. I know, going back to my military career, I was in a career field that women couldn't move forward in because it wasn't open up for combat yet. And I had a sponsor who stepped up and said, let me help you find another job, and here's the other ideas. So being able to be open and discuss the aspects of maybe as being LGBT, why you might not want a particular assignment or where to go next, even though it may be the best career path decision. I think those are all pieces that we can start bringing in. And Daniel, I think we're just about getting down to the end. You want to go ahead and take us to closing remarks?
Yeah, with that, thank you all so much for your time and participation today. Clif and Rick, if you have any closing comments, we'll maybe start with Clif.
Yeah, thanks, Daniel, very much. No, I just want to thank everyone for joining. I mean, we have certainly a large number of people on the line, which is exciting. This is a topic that I'm pretty passionate about. You could probably tell in my voice, or hopefully you could. And so, I just appreciate everyone joining, appreciate the time, and hopefully you find this impactful in your own journey.
Yeah, thank you, Clif. And so likewise, thank you everyone for joining and listening into today's call. But connect with us. Clif and I are both on social media, and so hopefully the information that we shared with you today at least provided some nuggets of information that you can either take back to your employee resource group or organization, regardless of where you are on your journey in terms of having programs or formal sponsorships, sponsor relationships in place. So appreciate the time today.
Great. Clif and Rick, thank you so much for all of your time and insights today, and thank you everyone for being on the call and for your active participation. One more reminder that our 2016 Out and Equal Workplace Summit will be October 4th through 7th at the Walt Disney World Swan and Dolphin Resort in Orlando, Florida, and our early bird pricing registration ends on June 15th. This call has been recorded and will be available as a digital archive after the session, and there will be a brief survey at the end of the call, and your feedback is important to us, so go ahead and fill that out. A reminder that our next town call will be on June 30th on governance model and executive sponsors, your key to a successful BRG. Thank you all for your time and participation today, and enjoy the rest of your day.